Charles IV, King of Bohemia and Holy Roman Emperor, had a long and successful reign. The empire he ruled from Prague expanded, and his subjects lived in peace and prosperity. When the emperor died, the whole empire mourned. More than 7,000 people accompanied him on his last procession. The heir to the throne of the flourishing empire was Charles's son, Wenceslas IV, whose father had prepared him for this moment all his life. But Wenceslas did not take after his father. He neglected affairs of state for more frivolous pursuits. He even failed to turn up for his own coronation as emperor, which did little to endear him to the Pope. Wenceslas the Idle did not impress the imperial nobility either. His difficulties mounted until the nobles, exasperated by the inaction of their ruler, turned for help to his half-brother, King Sigismund of Hungary. Sigismund decided on a radical solution. He kidnapped the king to force him to abdicate, then took advantage of the ensuing disorder to gain greater power for himself. He invaded Bohemia with a massive army and began pillaging the territories of the king's allies. It is here that my story begins.
I see. Well, hello, I'm Sientir, and I'm going to start playing Kingdom Come Deliverance. I was a backer of this game. I'm going to take a moment to look at some of the settings. Game settings. Yes, yes. Dialogue and cutscene subtitles, absolutely. Okay, that seems fine. Anything with graphic settings? Let's see. I will tweak some of these things and then I will be back. Okay, I've looked through those things. Anything I want to do from the DLC stuff? I don't know. Okay, for now I'm just going to do new game. Hopefully the graphical quality of things will not overload my system or anything. So, I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. Normal, thanks. So, I haven't actually played this game yet. I saw that it had a bunch of updates coming out and kind of sat on it and etc. The early 15th century was a time of turmoil in the Holy Roman Empire, which had flourished under the late Emperor Charles IV, but now, with his son Wenceslas the Idle on the Bohemian throne, was falling into disarray. The king's inactivity angered many of the nobility, as well as his half-brother, King Sigismund of Hungary. Well, that I think was just the opening that we saw. Kind of a summary of it, so you can pause it to read it if you need to. This is pretty. I imagine this is pre-rendered. Silver Scallots 1403. Which you can see in the title piece right there. This was sold on Dungeons No Dragons. I do have some mild concern about whether or not this has any sort of head bob type things that might cause me motion sickness. We'll find out. I'm curious to see how it actually plays. That V on the armor important for deflecting arrows, apparently.
Come God bless.
Same to you.
Today's a scorcher.
Well, husband, how goes it?
Good. I should get it finished today. Where on earth is Henry? I need him to run some errands.
He was still sleeping when I went out.
At this hour? Blue-blooded idler.
Well, it looks like he was out all evening, drinking like a lord.
Go and get the lazy bones up then. Quick clout round the ear should do it.
Mm-hmm.
Ah, yes, the trope of the sleeping hero. How many Legend of Zelda
Henry!
games start with a sleeping Link?
Get up now. There's work to be done.
Get up or I'll come get you up, you slugabed.
Hear that? You'd better not vex him. Now get up quick. Your breakfast is on the table. Wait, what's this? Have you been... Oh, Henry. How many times have I told you about fighting?
Oh, it's nothing. It's just a scratch.
You've been at that sword play again, haven't you? You'd better pray your father doesn't get to hear of it. You know how he feels about it.
Oh, don't worry, it wasn't that. I just scratched myself is all.
Well, just don't come crying to me if you really do get hurt. Now get up, you rogue.
Ooh, they have some nice popping noises in there. But yeah, as I was saying, I feel like a lot of Legend of Zelda games start with a sleeping Link, for example, waking up. I mean, circumstances differ. Like Breath of the Wild is very different than, say, Ocarina of Time versus A Link to the Past. But yeah, a lot of them do. So I feel like it's a little bit of a trope, but that's okay. It's the only time they get to sleep, right? Well, we'll see. I am interested to see how this game actually ends up playing, though. Like I said, I was a backer of it. It sounded really interesting to me, but I hadn't touched it when it first released, and because I don't remember exactly what was going on at the time. I was preoccupied with something else. And
A fine state you're in this morning. What on earth did you get up to last night?
ooh, okay, I get to learn about character dialogue stuff. But anyway, yes, I was just hadn't gotten around to starting it just yet, so I figured I might as well do my first playthrough here. Anyway, character. By means of the first two choices in this dialogue, you will select your character's default characteristics. If you're not satisfied with them, not to worry. All characteristics can be further developed without limitations. So we were chatting in the tavern, I was dancing, I was with Bianca, and I was working in the forge. Well, I don't know what any of these stats actually mean for anything. I imagine vitality has to do with either stamina or health, as that would typically be what that stat is about. Agility sounds like some sort of speed-related thing. Obviously, strength is good. Speech might be useful as well. I'm going to go with I was with Bianca.
I was with Bianca. We were, talking?
Talking, were you? That's what you call it, is it?
Stop it, Ma.
Well, I've got a feeling there's something you're not telling me. And it's connected with that scratch on your hand. And that suspicious-looking character with a sword who turned up in town recently.
Matthias was teaching me archery. Oh, that might be useful.
No. It's just... Matthias was teaching me archery.
Archery? Do you want to become a poacher? Have you any idea of the punishment for that? And where did you get a bow, anyway?
Oh, come on. I've no interest in poaching. It's just a bit of fun.
Christ, give me strength. Just don't do anything stupid. For the love of God. Promise.
I promise.
Okay, so objective started. Go to your father. I'll need to see if I need to adjust any settings, but go to the sword fighting lesson. Ooh, do you need any help?
Do you need me to do anything, Ma?
Ah, you're a good lad. But I'm fine. It's your father needs helping with that sword.
Okay, that seems reasonable. I don't feel like I need to exhaust all of the dialogue. Okay, so there is some... To eat any food, pick it up in the inventory in the food tab, select what you want to eat, and then eat it by holding A. I can pick up some cheese. Now, how does this feel if I use... Yeah, it definitely feels better with mouse and keyboard. Now, I is indeed inventory. Okay. So do I have a hunger meter anywhere? I'm going to set this controller off to the side. Okay, so I can eat with E. So if I eat... Okay, I do have to hold it to eat it. Okay, so here I have a nourishment stat. Do they have any sort of stab, slash, and blunt? Okay, so I'm not quite sure what all of these stats mean just yet. Codex, that might be useful. Okay, we got a lot of general stuff here. Animal husbandry. In the Middle Ages, a significant part of any property ownership consisted of livestock, horses, goats, cattle, and poultry. Horses were highly prized, and until the 12th century were only available for the nobility for military purposes and for light hauling. The change came in the 12th and 13th centuries, when horses came to be used for transport and tillage. In Bohemia, horses began to be shod from the 11th and 12th century, up to the 13th only as a rule on the front hooves, and later when horses were used for heavier work on all four. Okay, so that'd be like horse hooves, I assume. Almost every serf in the Middle Ages would prefer to own a cow than a piece of arable land, so even some landless folk had access to food by way of milk. Curiously enough, in the Middle Ages, milk and dairy goods were not traded much. For one thing, many people had a cow of their own, but also because no effective means of milk and dairy product preservation was yet known. Which makes a lot of sense. Sheep were kept by both serfs and the upper classes, largely for their wool. The poorest often kept a goat for milk and cheese. Pigs were left to forage in the woods all year round, feeding on beech nuts and acorns. Medieval pigs were much like wild boar and had little in common with today's pink animals. The most commonly kept poultry were chickens, and only rarely geese or ducks. All cattle grazed freely on the meadows around the village. In heavy winters, the livestock was kept inside the house, even sharing the same room with the people and serving as a source of heat. Right, body heat. Cars and wagons. In the Middle Ages, wagons were used for transport, agricultural work, and for wartime purposes. One of the simplest was a two-wheeled cart, while hay wains, were also to be seen. The oldest high-wheeled carts had one central axle connected to the undercarriage. From the 14th century on, twin-axled, four-wheeled wagons came into use. So that'd be the 1300s, which we're a little bit past at the time this game is set. The front axle was not steerable, resulting in a very wide turning radius. Wagons did not have a seat for the coachman, who either rode astride one of the horses or walked alongside the wagon. In wartime, a wagon could be turned into a mobile field palisade, a strategy that became famous especially during the Hussite Wars, or Hussite? Not entirely sure. I believe they were in Germany, though. When the strategy of wagon walls won more than one battle for the Calaxtines, the Hussite forces. Ecumenical Council. Ecumenical councils were ecclesiastical assemblies of representatives who discussed and debated on the topic of faith and church administration. For example, the Great Council of Constance, 1414 to 1418, which is a little bit after this game takes place, from what I understand anyway, which lasted 4 years and dealt with the issues of the Reformation and the Papal Schism, and also condemned the preacher Jean Hus of heresy, resulting in his execution by burning. Faith and devotion. Christianity was adopted in the Czech lands as early as the 10th century, though certain pagan practices remained until later, especially in rural areas, which is common, blending seamlessly with rising Christianity, which is also a common occurrence. Some of the folk customs were later modified according to church instructions. Others continued unchanged, and yet others were eradicated completely under church pressure. In addition to a deep faith in saintly patronage, the saints Wenceslas, Vitus, Nicholas, Ludmilla, Adalbert, etc., the Middle Ages revered the Virgin Mary and the various patron saints of the professions. One manifestation of medieval piety consisted of wayside shrines, conciliation stones or crosses put up in large numbers in villages, at intersections and along the main byways. In royal cities and liege towns, it was important to collect holy relics, remains and memorabilia to mark the saints. The cult of saints was encouraged, and cathedrals and churches gained prestige with the relics they held. So, for example, when Notre Dame burned, they talked about relics that they were saving from there, as kind of a point of comparison. It need not be emphasized that most of the relics were fakes, and that nobody took much issue with it. Yeah, that also. Devotion was shown in everyday life and accompanied everyone from the cradle to the grave by way of church rituals, occasions for worship, religious holidays, or regulations, for example, the numerous fasts or Lenten days. In some way or other, everyone believed in God. For complete atheism, we have to look to later centuries. Yep. Farming. Unlike today, when the land has long been given over to agriculture, the burgeoning of farming in the Middle Ages brought the need for new fields where there were only forests or untilled land. The timber from forest clearing was used for construction. The remaining roots, stumps, and scrub were burned, and the ground then leveled. The finished fields were cultivated by the three-field system. A third of the land lay fallow for 2 years to recover nutrients. This was used for grazing livestock, which added manure, which is a good source of nutrients. It was then returned to use and tilled, while in turn another third, which had been used for raising crops, was left to lie fallow. There was thus regular crop rotation to save exhausting the soil. Modern fertilizers reduced the need for that sort of thing, but it was really important then. In the earliest times, plowing was done with a simple device called an ard, or scratch plow. Where the soil was stony, working was very hard. The tiller had to keep watching the plow and used great force to push it into the ground. Similarly clumsy and imperfect were the harrows of the time. After harrowing, any remaining clods of earth would be crumbled with a mattock or a wooden mallet. This work was typically done by women and children. The most common crop, wheat, used to be full of weeds, and as such, not very economical, 15 largest sheaves yielding only about 18 kilograms of grain, often even less. Harvesting often had to be done using only a sickle for cutting. After drying, the grain was threshed out. Vegetables and legumes were cultivated to a greater extent than today, grown in fenced gardens next to houses. These were mostly peas and lentils, but also vetch and beans, and around the villages, flax and hemp were grown extensively. These would have been very useful for making things like hemp rope is incredibly common, and flax is used in making linen, I believe, but it's used for both the oil, flaxseed oil, and for cloth, as I understand it anyway. Hops were grown in seigneurial fields for the siege lord's brewery. Yes. Foreigners. Since ancient times, a foreigner meant not only anyone who came from outside one's town or village, and was thus a potential enemy, but also any person without legal status. Foreigners were without legal rights until they paid a surety. This matter was handled by courts of law, and there were various regulations setting fees for running a business or renting a house. Foreigners were not allowed to acquire or inherit ownership of them. The Bohemia lands were long open to foreigners, relatively speaking, with lively trade and cultural exchanges. First were the Celts, then Germanic tribes, and later the Slavs, but a large portion of the populace consisted of German-speaking people. The Germans were mainly courtiers, or worked entrepreneurs and merchants. Relations with the Germans were neutral at first, cooling off later and ending with animosity against all things German, though that was still far removed from the strident nationalism of the 19th century. Worse relations existed between the Czechs and Germans on one side and the Jews on the other. They lived outside of society, which often, having got permission from the king for a handsome price, carried out pogroms against them. Plague and disease in the mid-14th century affected migration, and fewer foreigners came to Bohemia. During the Hussite Wars, most of the towns had a majority Czech citizenry. Only the main centers in Moravia remained largely German. Brunn, Iglau, and Olmütz. I probably butchered those, but here we are. The Czech language gradually permeated from rural society to the higher social strata. A fundamental change in how language and ethnicity was viewed came with the Hussite Wars, in which most Czech speakers identified with the Hussites, while most Germans supported Sigismund and the Pope. I see. This was exacerbated by the foreign, often German, crusades summoned by Sigismund against the upstart Hussites. There's a lot of stuff to read here. Some of it is probably quite useful to understanding the setting. I'm just not sure how much I want the game to be, or this first episode to be Sientir reads the codex. You know what I mean? The conquest of Kuttenberg. In December 1402, during Wenceslas's imprisonment in Vienna, Sigismund attacked Kuttenberg, and by the beginning of the following year, seized and ransacked the town. Kuttenberg was loyal to the king and staunchly defended by its miners. When they finally surrendered, they were force-marched to Sigismund's encampment near Kolin and made to kneel before him in the mud in subjugation. In addition, they had to pay huge sums of money in reparation, even though the town and its environs had been pillaged by Hungarian soldiers. The treasury in Kuttenberg held not only coins, but also precious jewels, gold, and silver. Wenceslas later estimated the wealth seized by Sigismund to be worth more than 1 million gold ducats of the day. Wow. And then the Golden Age of Charles IV. When the young son of John of Luxembourg, Charles, inherited the title of Moravian Margrave and subsequently the Czech throne, he embarked on not only economic but also cultural development of his kingdom, a period dubbed the Golden Era. In 1348, Charles founded one of the oldest universities in Europe. Many cities, towns, and castles acquired new fortifications and new bridges. Infrastructure and churches were built. To strengthen his... I was trying to parse some of what was going on with the sentence. Oh, okay. New fortifications and new bridges, infrastructure, and churches were built. Okay, now I've figured out what's going on there. To strengthen his position in Europe, he made good use of political marriages, thus allying his family with prominent families in neighboring countries. He even had influence over the appointment of ecclesiastical dignitaries. Thanks to firm rule and a policy based on alliances, he was able to keep the peace in Europe. Charles was an educated monarch interested in the arts, which was reflected in the architecture of cities, especially Prague, where under his rule many new houses, churches, including St. Vitus's Cathedral, and the city walls sprang up. A bunch of stuff about society. So beekeeping. During the Middle Ages, beekeeping was distinguished by how the honey was obtained, as either forced or domestic. The domestic beekeeper kept bees in hollow trees or in straw skeps, wickerwork hives, and were not subject to any regulation. Conversely, the forced beekeepers, who kept bee colonies in the wild in hollowed-out trees, formed a fellowship similar to a guild and paid a fee to the owners of the woodlands for every bee colony they took over. Beeswax was the main raw material for the production of candles right until artificial wax, that's paraffin wax, was invented. Honey was used as a sweetener and fermented to make mead. Charles IV. Okay, so that's going to be May 14th, 1316, or 14 May, to 29 November, 1378. King Charles IV of Luxembourg, born Wenceslas, son of King John of Luxembourg, was the second member of the Luxembourg dynasty to become King of Bohemia, 1346 to 1378. And the first to attain the title Holy Roman Emperor. He held many other titles besides, Margrave of Moravia, Count of Luxembourg, King of Italy, King of the Romans, and King of Burgundy. Renowned for his diplomatic skills and erudition, he actively endeavored to consolidate his power and ensure the survival of his line in Europe, especially in Bohemia, Moravia, and Germany. He was well versed in several languages, and at the French court, he was tutored by none other than the future Pope Clement VI. During his reign, Prague and the lands of the Bohemian crown underwent a major transformation, becoming a powerful political, economic, and cultural center. For this reason, this period of his reign is known as the Golden Age. He initiated the construction of many superb edifices, which thus bear his name, including Charles University, Charles Bridge, and Karlstein Castle. He was keen to emphasize the role of religious faith in society. He renewed the cults of St. Wenceslas, St. Sigismund, and St. Vitus, consecrating various church buildings to them, among others, Prague Cathedral. So Prague Cathedral is an example of one of the church buildings that was dedicated to one of these. He married 4 times and had 13 children, most of whom died in infancy. The most illustrious of his offspring were his sons Wenceslas and Sigismund, who both became rulers over the lands of the Bohemian crown. So, Pope. The Pope is the supreme head of the Roman Catholic Church, Jesus Christ's deputy on earth, and cannot be removed from office. His word is regarded by the Church as infallible, equivalent in effect to the Holy Scriptures, which is why there was a Reformation. At the time of our game, however, nothing was quite so straightforward. Due to the papal schism that lasted from 1378 to 1417, which this game occurs towards the mid to latter part of, there were for a time as many as 3 rival claimants to the throne of St. Peter. For secular rulers, support for one claimant or the other was often less a question of faith than of political convenience. Yeah. There's some weird stuff about popes. I don't know how all of that stuff started. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm not going to get into that here, at least not now. Wenceslas IV. So 26 February 1361 to 16 August 1419. Wenceslas IV of Luxembourg was the son of the highly successful monarch Charles IV. He inherited the Bohemian throne and attained the German crown by election. However, he did not inherit his father's predisposition for ruling. Already during his lifetime, he was known for being a weak, idle, and moody ruler who was afflicted with many ailments, as well as difficulties meeting his royal obligations, despite the fact that he had been groomed for rule since early childhood. He was crowned Bohemian king at the age of only 2 years. He was more interested in hunting, alcohol, courtesans, and pleasures of the court. During his time as king, the lands of the Bohemian crown underwent several wars and conflicts involving his relatives, his own brother Sigismund and his cousins, the Moravian Margraves. The event that triggered the Margravite Wars, I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced, was that Wenceslas occupied the vacated estates of the Olomouc Archdiocese, which by law belonged to the nobles. Under the leadership of Jobst the Moravian, the Moravian lords joined with Sigismund in open revolt against the king, which had less to do with the Olomouc estates than with the legitimacy of the rule of Wenceslas, who, in the meantime, had been stripped of the imperial crown by the imperial electors for his incompetence and unwillingness to rule. Later, he also lost the power of the Bohemian crown when he made numerous concessions and awarded the nobles many privileges, de facto transferring the ruling power to them. His unwillingness to meet obligations resulted in his abduction twice, thereby removing him from the throne. First in 1394 by the Czech nobles, and then in 1402, just before this game starts, by his brother Sigismund. Wenceslas initially supported the reform proposals of John Huss and his adherents, but he did nothing to save the reformer's life when he was sentenced to be burned at the stake by the church. He thus set in motion what was later to become the largest, and only more or less successful, popular revolt in Europe. The Hussite Wars. However, he did not live to see these events, since he died in 1419. After his death, his brother Sigismund of Hungary seized the crown, but he had to fight for it, since not everyone acknowledged his claim, and once he had the crown, he did not live to enjoy it for long. Interesting. Okay, tutorials. Ooh, boy. There's a lot here. I'll look at some of these later. Right now, I want to read about character stats. During the course of the game, you will improve your stats, which you can find in the player tab, P. These improvements come automatically simply by playing, and all can be developed to the maximum. There are no obstacles or situations that would prevent such improvements of selected abilities. With leveling up of the given stats, you will get the option to select one of the perks that in some way improves an ability or changes the way it functions. You can select the perks in the player tab, P. Okay. There are 4 primary stats. Strength defines how well you can handle physical challenges. Greater strength makes it possible to wield heavier weapons and wear heavier armor. Each level up also significantly increases the capacity of your inventory. So that sounds really useful. Strength is the basic stat influencing your combat ability, and combat, in turn, also increases strength. Okay, so it sounds like it uses the sort of Skyrim, Elder Scrolls-y style of you get better at the things that you do, which is a perfectly reasonable way of doing things. That tends to be how real life works, for example. Agility is a measure of speed, movement, and dexterity. A more agile character can not only move faster, but also more easily evade attacks, fight more skillfully with demanding weapons, such as a saber, and shoot better with a bow. Archery, like other forms of combat, increases agility. Vitality influences the character's endurance, how much wounding you can endure, how long you can sprint, and how often you need to eat or sleep. With increased vitality, stamina and a speed of regeneration also grow. You can train your vitality by running, overcoming physical obstacles, and demanding combat. So I'm imagining what they're talking about here is combat that goes on for quite a while. So it sounds like the more you use stamina, the more vitality tends to increase and things like that. Speech determines the character's rhetorical skill and eloquence. The more you talk to people, the more eloquent you become. Becoming a better speaker means you can avoid conflicts before they even start, your haggling is more efficient, and you can disarm someone by argument who you wouldn't be able to beat in combat. There are also derivative stats. Charisma is a measure of how you can impress people. Fast talk will get you only so far. Fancy clothes and ornaments can give you that extra bit of stature you need. I see. So this is talking about how do people view you based on things that you're like wearing and stuff like that. Visibility is the opposite of camouflage. It tells you how easy you are to spot. And this is not the same thing as conspicuousness. A pitch dark garb is not very visible, but very conspicuous once spotted. The lower the better. You are invisible once this reaches 0. Conspicuousness is a measure of how you stand out in the usual environment. In other words, if you warrant a second look from anyone who can see you. I see. So this is how visible you are, and this is how much people care when they do notice you. It is derived from your clothes. The lower the better. With very low conspicuousness, people will mostly ignore you even when spotted. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Because this is a really interesting split between the two things. Because this is basically like, how easy are you to notice? And this is, once you're noticed, how memorable are you? Right? So this is that, like, blending in with a crowd. People will probably see you in the crowd, but you just don't stand out if you have low conspicuousness. Noise. But on the other hand, like, high conspicuousness might be connected with stuff that brings high charisma, right? Because if you look really fancy, you'll probably be more conspicuous. I'm just guessing here, but you'll probably be more conspicuous, but at the same time, you might have more charisma. Noise. The more noise you make, the more likely you are to be discovered whenever you move. Noise is derived from your clothing and weapons you have equipped. So I imagine metal armor, like plate, for example, would be very noisy. Speed determines how fast you can walk, run, and sprint. It is derived from your agility and your overall encumbrance. So the more stuff you're carrying, the more it's going to negatively impact your agility. Makes sense. The game also contains buffs and debuffs, which either improve or worsen your character's abilities in some way. You can find them in the player panel in the buffs tab. The most common include hunger, tiredness, bleeding, drunkenness, and overloading. Okay, I'm not going to read through all of these right now, although some of them are clearly fairly important. I'm going to see. So this is probably the player tab. So I have 1 strength, 2 agility, 2 vitality, and 1 speech. 7 charisma, 18 speed. Visibility, conspicuousness, noise. And then these are some armor and weapon stats. All right. Here's buffs. Hunger. Okay, so my character is hungry. So if I go to my inventory, I can eat another thing of cheese. Okay, so I have door keys, a green shirt, basic garment worn by a rich and poor alike, boots, a scarf. Okay. So you have visibility and conspicuousness right here. The red scarf definitely stands out. Tight olive hose and trunk keys. Okay, so this is keys that you have for doors, and this is keys you have for trunks. Would be more like chests and stuff. Okay, so I can look at things like food. This is all inventory. Gotcha. Okay, I think I've got a little bit of this figured out. Escape exits that. Now I can move about. We'll see how this goes long term as I play it. To see if any of the camera moves cause me any issues. Like I said, my main concern in this with first-person games in general is motion sickness. So I've got a compass at the top of the screen. So my character's father is this way, I assume. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot else today, just because I need to. Okay, I can hold down shift to sprint. I've discovered grindstone. Oh, here we are.
Come here, I need your help.
Yes, what do you need help with?
At least you're up, that's a start.
It is.
Anyway, we've a lot of work to do today. I'm finishing the sword for Sir Radzik, and I need your help.
With what?
I'm running out of charcoal. Run to the market and buy a bag from the charcoal burner.
I'll need some money then.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Kunesh still owes me for an axe, a hammer, and the nails I sold him a month ago. Not to mention his debt from before. Go and tell him to pay up, at least for the axe and hammer, and then use the money to buy the charcoal.
Kunesh? That drunkard? That'll be fun.
Well, you're a big lad now. I'm sure you can manage. If not, tell him that next time I'll come myself and personally use that hammer to bang those nails into his arse.
Oh dear.
Sure I'll be happy to hear it. Is that all?
Not quite. The Chamberlain at the castle has the crossguard for Sir Radzik's sword, which I had engraved in Sasau.
You want me to go and pick it up? All right. Money, charcoal, crossguard. Got it.
And ale. Stop off at the tavern on your way home. I know you'll be going there anyway to see that girl of yours. But make sure the ale's still cool from the cellar when you get back.
Her name is Bianca.
Right, so make sure Bianca draws me a nice cool one. Run along now, work won't wait.
I mean, it's not entirely accurate, but... Okay, so I need to go buy a bag of charcoal at the market. I need to collect the debt from Kunish in order to do that. And then some other things going on. Wait. Map. Oh, this is I like this map. This is very stylized, and it's quite fun. Okay. Buy a bag of charcoal, ale at the tavern. This is the crossguard. I guess I'm right by that, so I could pick that up first, maybe? Well, let's go down to the village and talk to Kunish. So that's C. Tab cycles, tabs. How appropriate. Does shift tab cycle? Nope. Shift tab brings up... Well, that was obvious. Let's, okay, AD does subtabs. Right. Let's close this. So this is the main gate to the village, it looks like. Got some trees out in the field over there. I like that they're starting me off with straightforward sort of questing stuff. I've tried to play Skyrim before.
Indeed I am, or I'll have nothing to smelt the ore with, and the king won't get his silver.
Which king do you mean, Master Tobias? The one sitting in some godforsaken dungeon, or the one who holds the key to the dungeon?
These are strange times, strange and ill-omened. But since I serve our liege lord Sir Radzik, I think you know the answer.
True, but where will Sir Radzik take the silver? Hardly to Kuttenberg. Now its citizens bend their knees to Sigismund.
Fortunately, that's not my problem. Perhaps Sir Radzik is keeping it at the castle until this old unhappy story reaches its end.
I only hope Sigismund doesn't get an appetite for our silver too.
That makes two of us. But back to business. I'll need 3 wagon loads.
I see your people are working hard. You'll have it tomorrow. Shall we go and drink to the deal?
With pleasure, good man.
Interesting. Yes, as I was saying, I've had a really hard time trying to get into like Skyrim because I fall off the quest train very quickly, and then I don't know what it is I'm trying to do or accomplish. So hopefully this game will be better in that regard for me. Where even am I looking? So far, it's interesting. This feels like a first-person version. I've only played a very little bit of Witcher 3. Maybe I'll get to that sometime on this channel. But so far, this actually reminds me a bit of the movement in that, because like it has that sense of I'm controlling a character that's animated to be very human in their movements, and that means like even if I just stand still, there's a little bit of like I'm not standing perfectly still sort of wobble and stuff going on. It feels like it's a camera attached to an idle pose, right? I'm not just a floating disembodied head, and that definitely makes the controls have a very particular and certain sort of feel. This must be Kunish.
God be with you, Kunesh.
What do you want?
Father sent me for the money.
My father sent me to get the coin you owe him for the axe, hammer, and nails.
I've got nothing. Clear off.
You know you owe father for a lot more than just the axe and hammer. If he went to the bailiff about it, you'd be in deep water. At least pay for the tools if you can't pay for everything.
I told you I have no coin, you bastard. Get the hell out of here, or I'll use the axe on you.
Ooh, persuasion. Sometimes you need powers of persuasion to achieve your goals. When talking to people, you can often choose what kind of impression you want to make on them. You can simply use speech, which, however, is influenced by the reputation you have at that moment with the person you're talking to. Okay, so if you just try to talk to them with speech, it's going to be modified by what they think of you. That makes sense. It's a neat little system. Then there's this heart with a crown thing. In the Middle Ages, social status was paramount, so the quality of your attire and how well groomed you are, together with your reputation, can make a big difference to how people respond to you. In other words, if they think of you as being in higher social status, they'll respect you more and whatnot. If you're on lower social status, they won't. They'll treat you worse, presumably. That was an interesting little flicker there. Let's see. Will make a big difference how people respond to you. If you look dangerous, people will be afraid to cross you and will also be more willing to assign risky tasks to you. That's interesting, right? Will also be more willing to assign risky tasks to you is an interesting line. That maybe they won't give you risky tasks if they don't think you can do them if you don't look dangerous enough or capable enough. That's influenced mainly by your strength and the deterrent effects of your weapons and equipment, but other things are also taken into account, such as bloodstains on your clothes. You can sometimes rely on money to do the talking for you. You just have to agree on a persuasive sum. Bribing people works in the same way as shopping. See trade and haggling. In special cases, you can try any other skill, for example, horsemanship. It's not only the manner of persuasion that's important, but also the specific offer, because sometimes it's not enough just to choose according to your highest characteristics. You really have to read what you're going to say. That makes sense? But different approaches work on different people. You won't intimidate a tough brawler easily, and no matter how well you're dressed, you won't impress the nobility easily. That's because Henry's abilities aren't simply assigned a universal value, but compared with the abilities of his counterpart. You can see the values of the various abilities in the game under the corresponding icons. You can always see your own abilities. Your counterpart's abilities are visible to you if it's someone you know well, or if you're skilled at reading people. Learn the perk Empathetic. So your money, the amount you have to pay. Okay. It's not just about stats, though. The outcome is influenced by other factors. For example, your reputation, whether you're dirty or bleeding, etc. If you can't outdo the nimble tongue of a merchant, for example, you may want to poison him a little first, and then he'll be easier to persuade. I see. Or if you lead a guard away from his friends, he'll be easier to scare. So here, the level of your reputation with your counterpart, Henry and guard. So maybe you know sort of their nobility and other things. Total speech skill level, total charisma skill level, total strength skill level. I see. Okay, so that just goes back and forth. I'll just say you can expect a visit from father.
If that's the way you want it. I'll tell Father you won't pay, and you can tell him what you told me.
And don't come back.
I guess I'm gonna go do that then. That seems like the reasonable thing to do. I mean, I can't really proceed until I have cash. So... Hi.
Yeah, about time. Have you got everything I wanted?
I went to see Kunnish, but he wouldn't pay, and then he threatened me.
I might have known. I'll sort him out this evening. I've no time for him now.
But without Kunnish's money, I can't buy those other things you wanted.
Here's coin for the charcoal and the ale. I'll get it back from that mongrel this evening.
Okay, that seems the reasonable thing to do. Apparently damaged my reputation a little bit, but, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, that seems like the most straightforward thing to do. So. Oh, there's the sun. Better not look at that too long. Just kind of looking at the environments. One of the things that really struck me about some of the early stuff with the game that they were showing was just their environments looked really beautiful. So, little plains of grass, rustling winds. They've done a really good job of making the environment feel like it's moving and stuff. Okay, so I need to go and get some other goodies. Does M bring up the map? What do you know? It does. Buy ale at the tavern. Bag of charcoal at the market. So that's just immediately to my right. Oh. Hi. Do you sell charcoal?
Good health to you.
Shopping. In shops, you first have to put your purchases into your basket and then either confirm the purchase or try to haggle. The amount you have to pay is always shown at the top of the screen. Okay.
See you later.
So, wait, how much charcoal do I need? Can I mean, there's the basket. I know I need some charcoal. I'm just not certain how much. Yeah. Yes, I know how charcoal works. So yeah, I need... Okay, so this isn't terribly expensive, but... Okay, you know what? I need to go check my quests. Quest log. Buy a bag of charcoal at the market. So it looks like I need 10 charcoals. That's what I'm guessing from this. Let's trade. I need charcoal. Yes. Let's see. I can slide this up to 10, except 10 charcoals at half a thing. Each will be 5 coin. I don't know how much ale costs, but presumably... Can I haggle them down to 4 coins, I wonder?
Let's have a word about the price.
Why not?
Okay, haggling. Haggling works both ways, whether you want to buy cheap or sell dear, which would be expensive, I assume. You select the amount you want to pay, or get W and S and confirm with E. The trader will then respond to your offer. If the answer is refusal, he or she will make a counter offer and wait for your response. So, your money, original purchase price, trader's last offer, your current offer. Your last offer not accepted by the trader. So it tells you kind of where things are. If the slider can't be moved in one direction or the other, it means either you or the trader does not have enough money. Ah, I see. Dragging out the haggling with one offer after another will gradually try the trader's patience, and eventually they'll drop the haggling completely. You can see how close you're getting to that point from the trader icon below the bar. The more gold there is in the background, the closer the trader is to dropping the haggling. Every unsuccessful bout of haggling lowers your reputation with the trader. Okay, that makes sense. So I want to offer 4.
What about this?
More.
Okay. Do I just do that to accept? Okay. I will accept.
Very well, I agree.
Hey, I saved some money. Okay. Cool. Well, that's certainly a start to the game. I feel like I need to go ahead and wrap up this episode, though, because it's gotten kind of long enough as it is. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here. And until next time, everyone, take care and goodbye.